Hello lovely people, I'm K3N and welcome to this week's Wonky Wednesday episode. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago about false cathedral windows or mock cathedral windows, and I talked about a workshop I used to teaching folded patchwork, and I found the quilt. I said I couldn't find it, I found it. So I thought I'd just show you quickly before we get into the cathedral windows. So it's a medallion quilt, so it starts in the centre with this folded shape. And then around here they're flying geese, but they're dimensional. Do you see? We might do some more of these in future weeks if you say you'd like to, but not this. This was all done by sewing machine. You know, we'll do it by hand and Wonky. And then these are the cathedral windows. Do you see? I can get my finger under there. And I didn't put any accent in the middle. I think I will with the one I'm going to make today. And you know, you can choose what you do with them, but this is the technique I want to show you, this corner block, but we're going to do it by hand, minimal measuring, you know, and it'll still work and be beautiful. Just to finish showing you, these are dimensional prairie points with little beads sewn on. These are just, you know, little pleaty things. These are cool, these three-dimensional windmills. Maybe we'll do those once as well. So this was just a quilt that I made to teach a workshop on folded patchwork, so I hope you like it. And let's go and make some mock or false cathedral windows. Okay, so here's what you'll need. First of all, you need to decide what size finished block you want. And that, basically we're going to make a four patches sewn together, and we're going to trap the window part in between. So I've got here 4 2.5-inch squares. So by the time I take out 2 1/4-inch-ish seam allowances, they'll end up 2 inches. So from 2.5 down to 2, which will make my finished block around 4 inches, you know, when I take a seam away from the edge. So I've got 2 2.5-inch squares, sorry, 4 2.5-inch squares, lots of numbers. So 4 squares the same size, basically, and then 2.5 plus 2.5 equals 5. So then my big square for my window needs to be 5 minus 1/2 inch, which is 4.5. So that's my window square. And then I've got another little square with this lovely rust print on that just came out so beautifully to feature in the middle of my window. And I've cut that, or torn it actually, the same size as these squares. It might need trimming back, we'll see. So 2.5. And then I've just got some normal piecing cotton, and I've got some cotton, which in my case is black, the same colour as my window. So here's what we do. So we get our big square and we fold it in half, like so, and if you want to go and give it a press with the iron you can. And then you need to make a little sandwich each end. So you take your first piece of your first 2.5-inch square, right sides up. If your cloth's got a right side, it needs to be right side up. And you lay your folded square on, and it's important that you match the raw edges here to the raw edge there, and that where the fold is, do you see, that's where the background square is bigger. Hope that makes sense. And then you take your other background square and you put it right side down in your sandwich on top. So now I've got a little sandwich at one end of this square, and the fold is where these squares stick out. I do hope that makes sense. And then we're going to stitch it along this edge. So I'm just going to put a couple of pins there. And we're going to do exactly the same thing at the other end. So if you're happier stitching that and then pinning and stitching that, then do it like that. I'm just going to pin them both at once while I'm pinning. So exactly the same thing at the other end of the folded square. So again, the fold is here where the background sticks down out. The background square is right side up. The top piece of the bread of the sandwich goes right side down. And then I'm going to stitch here. So I hope that is clear. I'll hold it up once I've stitched everything. I hope I've explained that. You can always go back and watch again or listen again. But the important thing is, well, several important things. But the most important thing that I think I've gone wrong with the most is making sure that where this fold of this big square is at the side where these squares stick out, that the raw edges are matched there. Otherwise it will not work. So now I've just got my normal piecing cotton, and I'm just going to stitch here somewhere in the region of 1/4 of an inch. I'll come through from the back. The other thing I should have mentioned is I've got fine cloth because I'm stitching here through 4 layers, so you wouldn't want big thick cloth. My black is a bit of old shirt, which I think is polycotton, and the cream is just regular sort of quilter's cotton type. So I just take a back stitch to start always when I'm piecing. I'm just going to do a little seam of running stitch. Needle's a bit thick, but I shall persevere. It's like origami basically, or no, not really origami. Well, anyway, it's like magic. It seems weird, it seems like it won't work, but it does. It's, yeah. And I will at one point, I think, also do the traditional ones. The traditional cathedral windows, you need 4 together to make the window. These, just one unit, gives you a window. That is just a different thing, you know. So I got to the end, I'm going to do 2 back stitches just to finish my seam. And then I'm going to turn it round and stitch the other end of this weird flippy floppy thing. Just making my knot. Come on. There we go. Back stitch to start. It's just a habit. I never trust a knot really when I'm piecing, especially not a knot in the thread. So just again 1/4 inch-ish. If you're not a quilter or a patchworker and you're not sure, you can always draw yourself a little line just with a, you know, whatever will show on your cloth. I could use a regular pencil on this cloth, that would show up fine. And draw yourself a little 1/4 inch line. But as long as you're somewhere in the region. And there I am to the other end. Now I hope I can show you this from when you're above. I'll do my best. Back stitch to end off. I'll make a knot ready for next time. Okay, so now I've got my unit, and here are all my raw edges on this side. So I flap open those little flaps and you get this weird looking thing. So that's how it should look. And here's the fold in that middle square. Do you see? And the 2 flappy flaps each end. Looking on screen, yes, you can see. So then I get my fingers inside that fold, and I'm going to open that fold up like that and turn it, and then where these 2 seams meet here in the middle, I'm going to match them up. I'm not going to worry about the ends for now. I'm going to match those up as best I can, and you can press them one side and the other side, or open. I'm just wondering which is the best with this poly cloth. I think I'll just press them one side and the other side. You just want to, it's a bit free, but if you nest them like that, it's the same as when you make a regular 4 patch, you just sort of nest them together. So you have one seam going one way, one going the other, and they'll sort of lock up together. And when you've got that right and pinched between your thumb and finger, then get a pin in it. And then you need to go up to this end, and you need to get your finger in that folded cloth there and just make sure it's pushed right down. Do you see what I'm doing? And then ease it out so that it matches. And then you need to get that up into between those 2 squares, matching those 2 edges. And it'll feel like it's not going to work, but it will. and it's correct that it stops 1/4 of an inch from the edge, like that. So I've got that matched there, and then I'll put that one on top and match that one there, and hold all that together and get a pin in that. And you'll think it's not going to lay flat. Don't worry, it will. Now you see here, this has all got creased inside. I need to get my finger in there and pull that out. And make sure you pull it out quite a way down. You don't want to inadvertently sew a pleat up here somewhere. So just get your finger right in and pull it right down like that. And all that matters then is that these two edges are the same length and match up all the way to the fold at the end. I've used black and white in the hope that it shows up for you. Do you see, here's the fold, and then that sticks out again. So I just match those raw edges together between the two squares and put another pin. And like I've said, don't worry that it'll seem, you know, like it's all pulling in. Do you see how it's all pulling in? It'll all work out. It's not straight, it's bent. That's fine. That's how it will be. Now I'm just going to get my thread back again, and then just matching everything up as I go as best I can. Those don't really match, but you know, match well enough. There, now they match. I'm going to sew again 1/4 of an inch. Don't pull my tail long. What's happening now? There we go. All the way along that seam. Back stitch to start. Pin out. So you do, I'm afraid, although it's Wonky Wednesday, you do have to really make sure that you've got that matching as best as you can, so that your window lies nice and flat. In a minute I'll show you. I'm coming up to the middle now. So again, I'm just going to make sure I've got it all pinched between my thumb and forefinger and get the pin out. And I'm going to not sew through my seam allowance. So I'm going to push that seam allowance over there. You can, if you want to, sew through your seam allowances. It's, you know, it's naughty. The quilting police will get you, but there's no quilting police here. So if you want to sew your seam allowances, you go for it. And I just always take an extra back stitch that side. I'm just showing you the proper way, but you know. And then I'm going to take my needle through the base of that seam allowance, coming out the other side. And then I'm going to push that other seam allowance out the way and go through there. And also it means I'm not sewing through a lot of layers. I can't even think how many off the top of my head, but it's a lot. So I'll just take a back stitch there as well. Either side of seam junctions, I usually just take a back stitch because it's an area of extra pressure. But this is for my journal, you know, it's not a quilt that's going to be used. Or I'm just going along with my running stitch, take the pin out, keep it pinched so it doesn't move. Because it's not laying flat, it is more inclined to move. I hope I'm not frightening you with all this talk of accuracy and seam allowances. Just, you know, I would say get some scraps of cloth if you're not a quilter or a piecer. Do your best. See there, I haven't got much, but I mind. I haven't got much cloth sticking out. I'll just take a seam allowance on the end. A seam allowance. A back stitch. Too much talk of seam allowances. Right, so now I've sewn that. And then what you do then is you open it up. Magic! And there's your little window. Now, you can go and press it with an iron, and that's maybe not a bad thing to do. I'm not going to. I'm going to finger press. So I'm just going to press those seams, just as like with a normal 4-patch, all going the same way. So that seam's going that way, that seam's going that way, that seam's going that way, and that seam's going that way. And I'm just going to make it lay as flat as I can. In the middle, it's not doing what it should do because of the bulk, but if you just go and really give it a good smash with the iron, it'll lay flat. So now you've got this little window affair here, but you haven't got the nice little edge. But what you should find is, because this edge here is now on the bias of the stretchy edge of the fabric. It will roll in. I've gone with polycotton, which was not the best choice, but do you see how it's rolling in on a sort of curve like that? Do you see? I'll try and finger press it as best I can. So what I'm going to do before I start doing any pinning is get my little accent square and lay it on. And like I said, it might need to be trimmed slightly smaller than the 2.5, because when I roll that, that's going to roll as well, do you see? And that might make that big. I'm just going to trim a tiny little bit off with my scissors, maybe 1/8 of an inch. I don't want to make it too small, so that it, so the edges show. But that's why I cut it 3/4 and then trim it afterwards when I see. And so then I'm going to roll those edges in. And they will just, I'm not doing anything special, I'm just pushing the middle with my thumb and in it goes, all being well. And I'm going to pin right through, but I'm not going to sew right through. I'll explain why in a minute. Try and get it somewhat central. I think I've cut that too small now. And you could do a little applique or something, and then I'd make sure to keep it well into the middle of your square, before you put it in, or you could do it after you put it in. And that one. Did you see you get this curve shape going on because of the bias edge? I did cut it a little bit small. I think I can just about get away with it. Do you see there? Because when that corner comes in like that, I don't want the raw edge of the underneath cloth to show, if I'm going to be super finicky about it. And then the far side. You could also, of course, have pinned your centre square on so it didn't shift about. So now I need to move that over because it's moved. There we go. Come on, go where I want you. Little do pig. Little do pig. If I was doing it on my own and you weren't all watching, I'd fuss about more with it, but it'll do. You can fuss about more with yours. There we go. And I'm not going to worry about the corners, I'll sort those out when I'm stitching. And then I've got here just some black, because it matches my window, piecing cotton. So I'm going to come and I start on one of these long sides somewhere, and I'm going to just come through the black, and I'm going to do an overcast stitch or a whip stitch. I'm just going to come through the black cloth only, tuck my tail in. I'm going to get that pin away. And now I don't want to sew it down through to the backing, because you see there's this little pocket here that I've got my finger in now. So I'm just going to sew through the top. So I'm through the black, my stitches are into the black, I hope you can see, but I'm not sewing it to these squares. You could do, but it's a shame to lose that little dimensional pocket, I think. So then I just whip stitch. I'll get up to the corner and show you how I fiddle about with the corner, and then I'll do the rest off camera, and then I'll come back and show you it at the end. So I'm just doing little tiny whip stitches, and when I coming up to the corner, I'm just going to push with my thumb there so that that just lays nicely. And it is quite fiddly, not stitching all the way through. It would be much easier to just stitch all the way through, so that's up to you, how fiddly you find it. And just be sure that your corners of your little backing piece, that you hide the raw edges. I'm just going to try and not go through the backing. I think I made it. I can't get my finger behind anymore. Now I'm up here, it doesn't matter if I go into the backing because it's attached there anyway. So I'm just going to go right up into that corner as neatly as I can. It kind of just lays where it, you know, it follows the natural curve. And then I'm going to turn to come the other way and then put that curve, and just with the tip of my needle, I hope you can see what I'm doing, just pushing it like that. I hope you can see. Can you see? And then it makes a nice little curvy point. And I'll come up into that fold. And stitch. And just make sure I poke that raw edge of that backing square. And that's that corner looking not too shabby. So I'll go and do that all the way around and then I'll come back. There we go, so I've stitched all the way around and there it is. Now, I have not been very accurate here because the idea of this is that you've then got a seam allowance, you know, if you want to sew it to other ones. So here I'm very, very small. What you could do is have your background squares bigger again than your inner square. So I had 2.5 inch background squares, twice make 5, so I went for a 4.5 inch inner square, 1/2 inch less. So if you did, say you could do 3 inch background squares, so 3 plus 3 is 6, and then do a 5 inch window square, so an inch smaller, and that would give you much more room. Exactly the same process, but that would give you much more room here, and then you could trim it back afterwards. So that's another possibility if you're like me, not very accurate. But I think it's super cute, and I'm going to stitch it into my journal. You can do all kinds of things in the middle. Like I said, you can fussy cut if you've got scraps of cloth with little pictures on. You could fussy cut little pictures. You could put, like I said, an applique or a little embroidery or something of that kind. I need a page to sew it to. Where's my Somerset Starts? It's a paper page. And then you could also put it onto a background cloth like that, you know, and do some slow stitching on the background areas to sort of anchor it onto the cloth. That would also look nice. So yeah, my journal's getting really fat. I don't know what we'll be doing next week, but I hope you liked that, and I hope you'll have a go and not be afraid. But it's really worth it for that magic moment when you flip it open. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more Cloth Tales. Bye bye.